The deposits of the Third Reich. Thousands of hectares, hundreds of secrets.
The task of researcher is to doubt and ask questions.
Nazi riddles. Krzysztof Szpakowski and his guests are looking for the answers in his series.
Znajdujemy się w Harendzie.
We are in Harenda, which I have built on my own. It has been my family house for 40 years.
40 lat. W czasie wojny to tu
During the Second World War, this was the place where all of the camps and works by Rize and Gontowa were concentrated. Most of the equipment was stocked up here, and narrow gauge railway reached this place. While I was digging these ponds, I found drainage pipes or energy cable which supplied electricity to Rize.
rury drenażowe. Co ciekawe, z każdej sztolni drenażem była odprowadzana woda. Tylko na tym odcinku, tutaj dosłownie 200 metrów.
Just within 200 meters radius, I have broken 3 drainage pipes with which water was channeled from the drift.
O której wiemy, że istniała, bo
In front of the household there is a drift. We know about it from accounts of witnesses who were there after war. Later this place was blown up by Russians. There are also 2 broken drainage pipes which suggested the existence of the drift.
oprócz tych 3 sztolni, w których miejsce zadają drenaże, jest kolejna sztolnia taka króciutka.
Apart from it, there is also another drift, very unusual one, because it was very short, only 8 meters down the ground. Finally, there are 3 drifts which were very fully completed. They were visited by witnesses who described them as fully completed underground city.
Relacje świadków mam, którzy byli w nich i opisują je jako podziemne miasto całkowicie wykończone. Jest to Gontowa.
This is Gontowa from the southeast side.
To w tym miejscu rozpoczęła się budowla kompleksu Gontowa.
In this place, the building of Gontowa has begun. In 1942, a big freight train arrived. It stopped on this track and building materials were unloaded here. Those materials were transported by a narrow gauge to the first block which was being built.
Do pierwszego bloku, który budowano.
Yes, it started in 1942. Before there had been nothing and we had been living calmly. Did work start here? From which side?
Tutaj, od tej strony, ta budowa zaczęła się tutaj.
Yes, the construction started from the tunnel. There the train arrived, at the top there was a freight train and they let these materials down. Did they let it by a broad gauge railway? Yes.
Koleją szeroką tutaj, tak? I tutaj się zaczyna.
Did it stop here? It stopped here where the barge is in the front of the tunnel. This is the place where they let these goods down. Did they reload it from here to the narrow gauge railway? They had a small railway. It was running through the tunnel and they were loading everything on these carriages. Cement in bags and building sand in the place where they were building these tunnels. They didn't see it precisely, while we weren't let it there. Did you, the residents, find out about it after war? Yes, we did. We woke up in the morning and they weren't there anymore. Everything disappeared.
To wszystko po wojnie dopiero się oglądaliśmy. Myśmy się rano obudzili, a ich nie było. Wszystko zniknęło.
Znane mi są osobiście 2 relacje ludzi, którzy byli w wykończonej części.
Personally, I know 2 stories of people who were in the completed part of the structure located below Gontowa. The first one was German who used to live in this house during the war. One of the guardians took him in. It was completely built. It had lighting and wide main corridor, the whole network of corridors and rooms. Cars were driving in 2 directions.
Poruszają się samochody w 2 kierunkach i cała sieć korytarzy i pomieszczeń. A druga to jest relacja pokrywająca.
The second one was an assistant of a director of the industrial complex in Ludwikowice. Things said by the lady coincide with the account of this German. She said that she came here once in her life. She precisely describes her way here. The assistant recalls that after driving through a railway flyover, After the second small bridge, there was a track leading steeply to the mountains.
Dosłownie za drugim mostkiem, a więc dokładnie w tym miejscu, bo to jest drugi mostek, była droga, która pod bardzo dużym kątem 180 stopni i bardzo stromo pięła się do góry. Dokładnie to jest...
This is exactly this place, the small bridge.
Za tym mostkiem znajdowała się ta droga, która stromo bardzo i pod dużym kątem odchodziła w kierunku...
No one could figure it up. It is a really credible story. You can't see it now. There is no track. When we arrived here with this lady, she had doubts, but in the 70s, this road was destroyed by the neighbor who built a pond at the top, and with the mining from this pond, he covered the road.
Tą drogę zlikwidował sąsiad, który wybudował u góry staw i urobkiem z tego stawu tą drogę zasypał. Twierdzi, że wjechali tym samochodem.
The assistant claims that they drove in by the car, exactly the same description of two persons.
Tunel oświetlony.
Very wide, lighted tunnel and lot of cars. They drove 500 meters and stopped the car on the left side. There was a huge room with made-up beds. It looked like a very big bedroom for several dozen people. Right after that she left the place. Two accounts concern the same place.
A więc mówię, dwie relacje dotyczą dokładnie tego samego miejsca. Dla mnie jest to o tyle wiarygodne.
For me, it's a credible story. This road here really exists, even though we can't see it. In the maps it also exists. The second element which confirms what they said is the fact that the drainage pipe with which water was channeled from the drift was broken.
Którymi wodę odprowadzano z innych sztoni. W tym miejscu znajduje
This
się
is the
ta
place
droga,
of the
o której
road
mówił
mentioned by the
asystent
assistant of the
dyrektora
director Molke.
W tym
This
miejscu
was the place of
mieszkał
living of a
Niemiec,
German,
który
whose
mieszkał
location was the
najbliżej
closest one
tej
to these
budowli.
tunnels.
Tą
This
drogą
way the
kierowała
assistant
się
drove in.
ścieżka.
She recalls that here, in this place, there was a brooklet, a road, and it led to
Za
tunnels.
drogą stromo bardzo i pod dużym kątem droga prowadziła do sztolni. Znajdujemy się od północnej strony masywu gontowej.
We are located in the north side of Gontova mountain, where the works took place. I've broken these drainage pipes. They channeled water from existing mask tunnels to the bottom of the brooklet, which was located several dozen meters further. It can be seen how much water is taken from this drift. In spite of many stills and tracks stuck at a depth of 8 meters, it doesn't withstand and the soil subsides.
8 metrów te szyny nie wytrzymują, ta ziemia się obsuwa. Północno-wschodnia część masywu Gontowy. To miejsce w 1997 roku, to zawsze.
Northeast side of Gontova mountain. I have discovered this place in 1997. This was the beginning of an adventure with Gontova. This was the moment when I started the procedure of exchanging lands with the state forest, and I was convinced that the entrance to Gontova is exactly this one. After 3 years I met with Jan Czuk, one of the first settlers. He set me right. He told me that it was an entrance to a concreted drift, the one that was almost completed.
Jaremczukiem, jednym z pierwszych osiedleńców, sprostował tą moją wiedzę i powiedział, że znajdowało się tutaj wejście do wykończonej prawie całkowicie sztolni.
Apart from this entrance, there are some other drifts, the one whose construction had already begun. We don't know their purpose, while these places were completed from the north and the southeast side, and here it was a place of concentration of works.
Wykończone były od strony północnej, wykończone były całkowicie od strony południowo-wschodniej, a tutaj tak jakby się te roboty schodziły, skupiały i tutaj były najbardziej skoncentrowane na dole.
Here, precisely below us, there are these broken drainage pipes.
Pan Jaremczuk, wracając do pana Jaremczuka, przyprowadził mnie w to miejsce i powiedział, że ta sztolnia, ta, która została wysadzona przez Rosjan,
Coming back to Mr. Yaremchuk, he took me to this place and told that the drift was blown up by the Russians who had been interested in it before. This well is its proof, a very massive and solid well. It suggests that there were huge amounts of water. What's interesting is that still a lot of water is drawn from that well. A residue from this drift is a very rust-colored. It means that there is a huge amount of iron which rusts quickly.
metalu, żelaza, który rdzewieje i widać dosłownie cały ten ciek wodny jest rudy.
Persons interviewed by Krzysztof Szpakowski, among others the deceased Józef Broń and Jarosław Jaremczuk, as teenagers after the end of war, were entering the drift located close by.
przystojnie były korytarze tak długie, że nie byli w stanie ich przejść.
There were such long corridors in the drift that they weren't able to go through them. They were simply afraid of going further. They were entering with a telephone wire on a reel. In the end, there was a wall with a place for elevators and stairs. When they were planning another trip, Russians came. They fenced the whole area. Then they were examining it for 3 months with the climbing equipment. And finally, they blew this area up. How did Germans mask drainage pipes?
Takie rurki, bardzo zmyślnie budowany jest przepust pod drogą, który dla
They built a massive cover below the road. Right below it, there was a drainage of stoneware pipes. For someone who isn't an expert in masking, the place was unrecognizable. The water was channeled to the bottom of a brooklet. Generally, the place impossible to find, masked in a very clever way.
Więc one są w zasadzie nie do znalezienia, bo są bardzo zmyślnie ukryte, zamaskowane. Panie Janie, byliście pierwszymi osadnikami, tutaj przyjechaliście...
Were you the first settlers in 1945? Yes, exactly. And where did you live? Here, on your yard. What is the closest house in Riza? Please tell me, how did it look like here? Barracks on these fields were everywhere. They stretched for over 30 meters. It was really difficult to manage a farm. We were afraid that there were some mines, but we were careful and somehow we managed. We were told to pull down these barracks. They also came here to dismantle them, but the foundations have left. It was hard, really hard, but I remember precisely the tunnel here. I even remember when they dismantled these machines and equipment.
Także było ciężko było po wojnie, no ale pamiętamy dokładnie ten tunel tutaj pamiętam jak rozbierali później te wszystkie te urządzenia, te maszyny.
Znałem się bardzo dobrze z pana bratem, z panem Józefem. On mi dużo opowiadał, ale też przyjechał kiedyś...
I knew very well your brother, Józef. He told me a lot, but also Jaremczuk come once. And they both told me that as teenagers they were going inside this drift. You also did?
Wchodzili do tej sztolni, która była gotowa tutaj. Ale pan też tam wchodzi.
Yes, there was also a cart at the top of this drift. We went there and my brother told us to get into it. There were a few more boys. Józef was a driver, but there was only a small part of railway track, so that was it. The drift was finished. Were tunnels concrete? There was no edge. We managed to drive only a few meters. I don't remember if there was concrete, but I remember that there was a lot of buildings materials. For example, sand and gravel. Thousands of tons were lying on our yard on that side.
Tu, w tych fundamentach,
Here in these foundations there is a drift underground, the one which I remember from my childhood. It was whole flooded with water. Just behind me there used to be a narrow gauge railway. It ran through this ravine several hundred meters.
co najmniej kilkaset metrów. Fundament pod średnią...
The foundations for a medium ramp station. Here, exactly where I am standing, there is a ramp which looks like that once cut with a laser. Carriages were going up on it. They were taken to the parallel narrow gauge railway several dozen meters further. Another ramps led to the top, identical foundations.
Następne pochylnie prowadziły do góry jeszcze. Identycznie wycięte, identyczne fundamenty. Świadczy to o tym, że roboty były prowadzone również.
It is a proof that works were carried out also on a higher level. I am convinced that the fundamental level on which main buildings were built was the one located on the height of 580 meters. Why? Because I dismantled exactly the same railway about 200 meters from here. There is also the same ramp down.
Ubierałem 200 metrów stąd, dalej. A więc cały ten, tam też taka pochylnia w dół jest.
I've got finished buildings on the right and on the left. This was one of the places where works were aggregated in 1945.
Roboty w 1945 roku. Za moimi plecami znajduje się tunel, który biegnie do obiektu Molke.
Behind my back there is a tunnel which runs to a place called Molke. With this tunnel, secret weapons were transported from the factory Nobel Dynamite. Transports were arriving in the area of a camp which was located here below Gontowa mountain. It was kind of a shield. The Allies wouldn't have decided to bombard this place. Prisoners from all over Europe would have suffered.
Cierpieliby więźniowie z całej Europy. Poza tym dowód na to, że te obiekty były łączone. To pytanie pada zawsze przy każdym obiekcie, czy ten obiekt jest połączony z książem, czy ten obiekt jest połączony z włodarzem. Wszystkie te obiekty były na pewno połączone, to jest dowód na to. To jest dokładnie teren tego największego obozu.
This is the area of the biggest camp located below Gontova mountain. Thanks to photos taken from the plane, we can see that barracks were on the other side where the tunnel Molke is. It is a mine shaft. That means the drifts were also here. While this area wasn't developed, there were only meadow and it was easy to build a camp here.
To były jakieś łąki i łatwo było wybudować po prostu w tym miejscu obóz.
Z tego co wiem, to oni budowali na każdym...
Germans built on each level ground, they were building barracks. It was a building for a management. This one? Yes. From here building works of Rize. The giants were supervised.
Prac budowlanych przy Olbrzymie.
Moim zdaniem są gdzieś plany Rize?
I'm sure yes, 100%. Germans were even counting nails, so it's rather impossible that they didn't have plans. Today plans of various building investments are done in few copies. Even if there were 100 of them and 90 were destroyed, there is still 10 left.
90, czyli bardzo dużo zostało zniszczonych planów, no i tak 10 zostało.
Północna strona...
The north side of Gontova and two drifts behind me, they were connected with a crosswise corridor. I don't know how do their condition look like now, but they are really dangerous. It's located in a fragile sandstone. I entered these drifts personally. What's interesting is that during dozens of years, in all of the studies, only two drifts were mentioned.
To są przekazy autochtone.
There are information from indigenous inhabitants and residents who arrived here in 1945. I will quote on Józef Groń. He told me that after war in 46, below these trees, he cut a tree while falling down and knocked down almost half of a forest like dominoes. These trees were in plant pots. They were artificially planted in order to mask very important places.
Bardzo istotne obiekty, które były pod spodem.
An interesting thing is that Mr. Groń was also working in the mine. He was advised to dig and look for a shift and then coal. This is rubbish. Kilometer further there was a mine shaft which was functioning and we had enough amount of coal.
Kilometr dalej była kopalnia, która wspaniale funkcjonowała i najprościej było tego węgla szukać po prostu po pokładach, idąc po pokładach węgla. Także tutaj przyszło polecenie z Warszawy, że...
It was an order from Warsaw to get in the direction of these structures. This is the biggest building on the ground on Gontova mountain, the very big one with a basement, several dozen square meters of surface.
Około 20 szeroki. Kolej łącząca Wałbrzych z Kłodzkiem.
The railway connecting Wałbrzych and Kłodzk, the tunnel between Bartnica, where we are now, and Spruce, where the tunnel finishes. This escarpment behind me had been built shortly before war. Left tunnel was built not during the construction of the railway, but later in the interwar period. Does it suggest something? What was its purpose? Initially, next to railway tracks, there had been a resistance wall, then suddenly it disappeared.
To, że był mur oporowy, w którymś momencie przed wojną ten mur zniknął. Poza tym wycieplenia.
Pay attention to places where in winter snow melts. There should be more of it. Snow should even lie here, while it melts much quicker next to tunnels intakes. Then a number of other technical details which confirm what happened here. For example, communication system which was completely different than the one commonly used in railways. These were different symbols and labels for trains which joined the traffic after leaving the underground tracks. Krzysztof Szpakowski had been discovering secret of this tunnel on his own, but as it came out later simultaneously with Tomasz Jurek, both explorers had an opportunity to share with results of their research. In this case, it's beneficial because our joint theories are confirmed. This places is joined with other places, as Tomasz Jurek noticed. He noticed as well that these buildings are untypical. They don't have living quarters. There are no barns, whereas these are technical buildings and they are brick.
Wokół. To nie są budynki typowe, takie jak wszędzie widzimy, a więc, że jest izba, a stajnia i stodoła, tylko to są budynki takie techniczne. One odbiegają formą od pozostałych. Poza tym są porządnie zrobione, są murowane. To jest jeszcze bardzo istotne, na co należy zwrócić uwagę.
We should focus also one thing. We are 35 meters below the level where buildings on Gontowa are built. According to our previous research, levels between buildings measure 30 meters, so on such a big area, distance of 15 meters aren't any problem. These are regular slopes, easy to cope with for a train. If needed, they use two railway engines.
Nawet jedna lokomotywa, gdzie było bardziej stromo, jechały dwie, jechała z przodu i z tyłu. To są szczegóły. W każdym razie wszystko się zgadza się.
Therefore, everything fit together into a whole. The height of buildings and tracks is right. The place is right. Various photos of buildings' faces of this structure are also approved, as well as the shape of this area. In my opinion, this is not the end of camouflage. Its form now is a consequence unexpected arrival of Russians.
To jest znowu efekt niespodziewanego nadejścia Rosjan. Docelowo, podkreślam moim zdaniem, miało to wyglądać w ten sposób, że
Ultimately, it was supposed to look like that. Those tunnels entering Gontowa and Włodarz were connected by a tunnel on the left side. The wall was moved between to the middle of the tracks. This is how they came back to the previous situation. Thanks to that, the group of inquisitive people was moved away from the railway station in Świerki. There were siding and trains were redirected. That is why Germans moved away reserve from this important junction point in order not to accumulate strategic places too close to each other. It's only my opinion, but it's really probable. If we take into consideration how they camouflage everything and how much attention was given to it.
Kamuflowali i chowali, jak dużą wagę do tego przywiązywali. W tym miejscu kończymy naszą opowieść o Gontowej.
I personally knew and talked with witnesses, both Germans who lived here and settlers who came here in 45. I dare to have a thesis that I have the biggest amount of information about this place. The reason why I've decided to take up this topic and talk about Gontowa is what I hear around, read in books and in internet. These are some rubbish. My information is totally distorted. For example, the issue of Mr. Grabowski.
W 2007 roku sprzedawałem również cały ośrodek, ale również przygotowanym w zasadzie formalnie już działką i miejscem do odkopania sztolni. I wtedy opowiedziałem...
It is said and written in books that this drift was pointed out by Grabowski. There is even a name Grabowski Chamber. It's totally rubbish. While I was selling this place to a new owner, I gave away a few secrets. I told him about Grabowski, Jaremczuk and Józef Groń. Mr. Grabowski didn't have anything in common with this drift, but he told me about a deposit hidden in Sokolec about which I told the new owner. They have mixed the names. They have been repeating it many times, and that is why now it's called Grabowski Chamber. But that's not true. I will repeat one more time that Mr. Grabowski, who I know very well, doesn't have anything in common with this drift.
Opowiedziałem właśnie wtedy o panu Jaremczuku, który to potwierdził, i konkretnie o panu Groniu, a dla okrasy opowiedziałem o innym moim informatorze, a mianowicie o panu Grabowskim, który
Were all of these structures connected with each other? Were they connected with Włodarz? These questions have arisen ever since. Yes, for sure everything was connected. This is the proof of how did it look like. The tunnels measuring about 2 kilometers length, which finishes in the center of industrial valley Molke. In the place where famous Muchołapka was located, where thousands of people worked. But we will talk about this place in another episode. Thank you for your attention. Krzysztof Szpakowski.